Hey everybody, we're diving once again into the fascinating discussion of miracles. We've been exploring the role of testimony and questioning whether or not it's ever rational to believe in miracles. Be sure to check out the playlist if you want to catch up. Here's the thing with some skeptics that I want to address today. Some will just diss miracles outright because they believe no matter what, science will eventually find a natural explanation for these seemingly supernatural events, so it doesn't really matter. It's kind of like saying, hey, we used to think thunder was the gods bowling, but now we know it's electricity. So your miracle cure for leprosy, probably just a lucky coincidence at best. One day, science will figure it out. But hold on a second, this logic has a few cracks in it. First of all, back in the day, people were not so quick to blame everything on God. Thinkers like Augustine and Aquinas did believe God could work behind the scenes, even in natural events. But they didn't just throw up their hands and say, well, I don't understand this, so therefore God did it, every time something weird happened. Plus, just because past miracles turned out to be natural events, like, say, unusual weather patterns in the sky instead of divine anger, that doesn't mean that every miracle claim is destined for the "it was just science" spin. Imagine a child effortlessly catching butterflies in the garden. They might then confidently declare that we can catch anything with wings. But what happens when they try to catch a hawk soaring high above? The butterfly's ease of capture has no bearing on the hawk's swiftness and power. Similarly, just because science explains earthquakes or a cancer going into spontaneous remission doesn't mean that it can explain someone coming back from the dead. Second, this whole science will conquer miracles argument cuts both ways. If science figures out a natural explanation for something once considered a miracle, then yeah, the miracle claim does weaken. But what if science keeps scratching its head, unable to explain certain events? Then wouldn't that actually strengthen the case for a miracle? Isn't it true that the more we learn about biology, we know things like, dead people stay dead? Finally, miracles aren't random events. They often fit into the bigger picture like pieces of a puzzle. Think about Jesus predicting his own resurrection, or Paul's blindness being a part of a larger divine mission. A purely scientific explanation would still need to account for these other connections, not just the isolated events themselves. So when it comes to miracles in science, sometimes increased knowledge makes a natural explanation less likely, not more. Scientific progress doesn't necessarily weaken the case for miracles. Sometimes it actually strengthens it. But wait, let's tackle a similar objection. If you're not already on board with the whole theism thing, isn't the concept of miracles a tough pill to swallow? John Stuart Mill, a very famous philosopher, argued that unless you already believe in the supernatural, no miracle can convince you otherwise. Even witnessing a seemingly impossible event firsthand wouldn't shake your skepticism. You'd still hold out for some unknown natural cause. So, doesn't the Christian apologist need to prove God exists first, before they could even discuss something like Jesus' resurrection? But here's what Mill overlooks. What if we just considered theism itself as a possible explanation for miracles? Like, why can't we just take that idea out for a test drive? Think of it like this. If you're remotely open to the idea of a higher power, or that atheism could be false, then a miraculous event becomes plausible. It's no different from encountering something amazing in the natural world like the Eiffel Tower. We don't just assume that it randomly appeared, we recognize the work of an intelligent designer and engineer. The same logic can be applied to miracles. This is where Mill confuses logical possibility with probability. Just because a natural explanation for a miracle is remotely logically possible doesn't mean that it's probable. In fact, naturalists often dismiss miracles altogether rather than try to fit them in their purely natural framework. Take, for instance, the resurrection of Jesus. Skeptics are much quicker to call it an embellished story rather than some weird natural happening, in part because they know the problem that the resurrection poses to their particular worldview. So the bottom line is this. If you're at least a little open to the idea of a higher power, then miracles become part of the conversation about how the universe works. Miracles are not just God of the gaps thinking, and you don't have to prove God exists first before you're rational in thinking that a miracle happened. Miracles, in fact, are the proof that God exists. These are just terrible ideas. Thanks for watching.